stick to 20 minutes, then all of them will have a lot of...
Sure. The subtitle is Anna Hazare's soap opera. And these are just random thoughts which I'm just thinking aloud before actually putting down as a paper, is that what is new about this movement? I mean, what is it that, and how does it help us understand what is happening to popular democracy? I think we need to see that the way movement has worked itself, we might have some new insights into what is new that's happening to democracy itself. I think there are some new phenomena that might be emerging. For a long time, I believe that the way democracy works, it's not just in terms of institutions and procedures. That's one aspect. But I think it's also to a large extent located in the cultural domain of the society. That's how a democracy works itself. And Anna Hazare movement gives me a sense that there's something to do with the way our culture works. And I'm referring to this as the epic predicament. We are all fond of epics, Ramayanas and Mahabharatas. And one thing about these epics that I have always found intriguing is that we all know what is the end result of an epic. That when you're watching Ramayana, we know that Ram is going to win. There's no suspense there. It's not possible when you're watching Ramayana, Ravan might win. If there's any alternate story, then it becomes controversial, like the Delhi University, many Ramayanas get. Mahabharata, you know each character. But yet there is something intriguing which makes us spellbound to watch these epics. What is intriguing is that they are predictable. I think the fact that they are predictable itself attracts us to these epics. Something that makes us very familiar. Something that makes us this repetitiveness. I'm only speculating that one of the reasons why some movement like Anna Hazare could be so popular is after all for a bill. And all of us know this bill cannot work. This corruption is located so deep in terms of political economy. We have seen the Maharashtra case that the additional collector was burnt alive. And there was no investigation, nothing happened. Forget ordinary people. We are seeing what is happening to RTI activists across India. Every day we hear of an RTI activist being killed. So simply having some Lokpal bill and to imagine that all citizens will get empowered to catch hold of officers, I think is the biggest myth that Anna Hazare has managed to create. And we all somewhere know this, that is the myth is not going to work. Yet we are intrigued by this movement. So there is something in the culture itself one needs to perhaps understand why this has become such a phenomenon. And I am referring to this as the epic predicament, that we are all trained in epic culture. That we want to build and view something that is big, that is larger than life. Give it proportion bigger than life. And I think media has played its role perfectly. And I think without media, Anna Hazare movement wouldn't have gone that far. So media, I think, has made it into a big, like a Ramayana serial. I think every morning we get up, we watch what will happen to Anna Hazare. If you repeat Ramayana, we watch every Sunday at 9 o'clock. This was every day at 9 o'clock morning, is it what happened to Anna Hazare? Is on fast, is not on fast, we did this for almost 6 months every day. And knowing very well something big is going to come out. So I think we'll have to think more these movements when we analyze. I don't think simply politically we can analyze these movements. There is something cultural about them. Why certain movements which are small become larger than life. So we'll have to talk, first proposition I'm making is we'll have to talk in terms of the cultural domain. Second is to look at in terms of how did each political formation respond to this movement. And that will again give us some new dilemmas that might be emerging in Indian democracy. If you look at across board, first look at the whole response of the liberal Democrats, primarily those who wrote in newspapers, Indian Express, Hindu, I think all newspapers carried a heavy amount of writing on this whole Anna Hazare phenomena. And the deep point that you find is the issue that we have a basic confusion with, given the mammothnesss of Indian democracy, that we are such a large country, with such a large population. Our institutions don't work like the Western institutions. What is happening in the Indian context is that democracy turns against itself. That is, procedures instead of aiding democracy become actually a block. That's what ruling classes do. That they are taking aid of procedure. Corruption is happening in India not always in violation of procedures or institutional norms. But it can well happen by taking the institutional norms itself, like the courts. You have so many cases pending. We know, each convict knows that once each accused knows that even if he is convicted, it is going to take 10 to 12 years. And courts, police, our institutions are well aware of this fact. That's what they do even with Naxalites. There need not be any crime an Naxalite who is arrested needs to do. They interlock him in 50 cases. 10 in Jharkhand, 10 in Chhattisgarh, 5 in Andhra Pradesh, 6 in Bihar. That's the end of the story. That chap will be in the prison for next 10 years. So simply institutional procedures, institutional norms. So corruption can happen because of institutional procedures and norms, not by violating. I think this is one thing that Anna Hazare movement brings, and that is a concern why Anna Hazare wants a very centralized structure, deep one Lokpal, 6 most honest people. So it's a concern which emerges, which is for centralization, which is very dangerous. What liberal democrats have been cautioning us, that there cannot be any body which is above parliament. There cannot be a body which can circumvent representative institutions. This would be undemocratic. But I think while that argument is true in itself, the question that one has to pose for liberal democracy is, what do you do with institutional procedures? I think Anna Hazare movement brings this in. What do you do with institutions? What do you do with the mammothness of Indian democracy? We can't feign anymore that we are like Western liberal democracy. We have 5, there is a court case and then there is a time-bound justice. Whether it's courts, whether it's parliament, whether it's bureaucracy, you take. Procedures itself somehow are problematic. That's the reason you wait for something like PIL. So you're always trying to circumvent procedures. So I think procedures have a very problematic and a complex place in Indian democracy, and we need to deliberate on that. That's where I think that's one point that Anna Hazare movement brings in a very big way. If you look at left of center response to Anna Hazare movement, again I think there's a new aspect that comes in Indian democracy, is the confusion that left of center had in terms of how to appropriate or how to identify with Anna Hazare movement. They, I think, were caught in this dilemma which they had traditional with development state sort of a model, is that they want to critique the state, but somewhere do not want to delegitimize it to the extent that the corporates get legitimized. This, I think, is the conventional dilemma that we have in neoliberalism. We are adopting a neoliberal development of model. That what do you do with state? If you delegitimize states too much, then invariably it benefits the corporates. If you don't, obviously state is lethargic, state is corrupt. Therefore, even in something like RTI, if you look at all the new legislations that have come, what is unfortunate is happening that our public institutions are getting exposed. So we now today know for sure that there's corruption in bureaucracy, there's corruption in courts. Today we are talking about accountability of courts, there's corruption obviously with our public representatives, so on and so on. But we are not able to talk about corruption in corporates. The very growth of corporates rises only on corruption. But then what is the definition of this corruption? I think is also very fixed in democracy. It emerges. What is our idea of corruption? I think is also something we need to debate on. So this, I think, left of center's response, if you keep looking, I think there has been massive confusion. That they were critiquing, they said we want Anna Hazare, but they were circumspect about Anna Hazare's centralization mode. I think this emerges because we do not know how to critique our public officials and institutions. We want to keep a check, but we do not want to delegitimize the state completely. How do you do it? You just have to watch the TV, 9 o'clock bulletin, and you know that what a massive change has come in last 10 years, the way our anchors behave with public officials. Only the other day I was watching Barka interviewing Naveen Patnaik, and I was just astounded. She was saying, Naveen, just a minute. And then the Rajdeep Sardeshwar the other day was interviewing Maharashtra Chief Minister, post Mumbai polls. And the chap was answering, this chap cuts him short and says, no, we are short of time, please, I am moving on to the next panelist. The way we have learned to treat our public officials, it's not about individuals, I'm talking about public offices. It has happened because of bills like Anna Hazare. It's a very strange thing that's happening in Indian democracy. We are delegitimizing, and you'll never find a Rajdeep Sardeshwar Barkada talking like that to Ratan Tata. That fellow Sunil Seth or someone comes on, corporate chap. We talk that as rubbish many times, but the way he is projected as an intelligent, sharp chap. So I think there's something happening in Indian democracy where our models of what is corrupt, whom we are privileging, who is replacing. I think there's a massive shift that is happening, that all that is public is increasingly looked as private. The state is now almost treated and behaves as if it's a private institution. So you can say, Naveen Patak, Naveen, come on, this is like a private individual. Private is becoming public. You teach a Ratan Tata as if it's a big institution. With a lot of respect, with a lot of dignity, and you know that all private firms are taking up increasing public role in terms of funding education, funding health, and Bill Gates funds, Narayan Murthy funds, and we have all these Ajit branches into education in a big way. So we are increasingly treating all that was private as if it's a public institution. And Anna Hazare movement has to be analyzed in this kind of complexity that where does it fit? And our perception as left of center confusion with Anna Hazare movement is that I think it aids this process of further delegitimizing state and somewhere legitimizing the corporate. So what you do with it is a different question altogether. But do we then stop talking of corruption? How do we expose corruption, corporates? I think all those issues come along. So one single political formation that has benefited in the long term, I feel, from the Anna Hazare movement, that is the right-wing forces. I think the BJP and the RSS combined that as to a large extent one because of Anna Hazare movement. It's not simply because of the movement. Again, I think it's more because of the again this cultural aspect to the movement are something that are very dangerous. At one superficial level, I think, is Anna Hazare's whole performative aspect. That's the way he talks about Vande Mataram, Bharat Mata Ki Jai, and his whole persona is like an RSS pracharak. He's a bachelor, and he's honest, he's a simple living. I think that at one performative, superficial level, I think the image that has got reinforced over last 1 year, I think is that of a typical RSS prachar. We have got used to this idea that somebody who is a bachelor, somebody who lives a simple life, somebody is honest chap. At a deeper level, what is again very problematic about Indian popular democracy is that we always mistake being naive to be being simplistic. I think we get confused very quickly between these two things. And we always have sympathy for someone who is naive, who has very simplistic understanding of reality. And we think this is a positive feature. What is good about Anna Hazare is that it does not have a complex understanding of democracy. So if somebody is beaten up, slapped, he says, "Acha hua, dusra milna chahiye." When we talk about democracy, he thinks that a Lokpal bill can completely transform the issue of corruption. I think this is something that right-wing movement has at its core. Right-wing movement always pitches on the commonsensical aspects of popular culture. That's how they grow. That's how the way they meet, for instance, build myths on Muslim communities. They're married, their population, this and that. So I think this aspect I find somewhere is at the core of Anna Hazare movement. That it builds on one at a broader performative as of a pracharak, and then at a more deeper level, I feel this is a naive person who had such a simplistic and reduced understanding of democracy was holding all our attention for 1 year. From all serious scholars, from JNU to Osmania, where everyone was discussing Anna Hazare phenomena, which was such a simplistic. What has gone wrong with Indian democracy? I think it is this confusion. And I remember Ashish Nandi writing a piece when Congress was coming back to power. He said that he went to a restaurant where I believe the waiter said that किसको वोट डालोगे? He said मैं मनमोहन को कांग्रेस को डालूंगा. क्यों डालोगे? मनमोहन अच्छा आदमी है, भोला आदमी है. So I think this whole Hindu culture myth we have of patronage, somebody who is simplistic, somebody who is innocent, I think we always lend our patronage to. So if you make a complex analysis, people move away. If you make a simplistic, common-sensical analysis, there's something that's attractive in our culture. It's a very reduced sort of, partly to maybe to do with, I'm just speculating a little more, is with the Bollywood sort of style we have. One hero, one villain. So I think Anna Hazare movement spread like that. I think right-wing movement spread like that. Muslims as the enemy and Hindus as the protagonists. So I think it's a very reduced, two antagonistic camps. And culturally, I think we are equipped to look at democracy, at conflict, social conflicts in that reduced way. We need easy targets, and therefore I think a lot of right wing, which we cannot politically explain, I think we'll have to take for more performative, cultural, symbolic analysis. Why does BJP suddenly succeed? I think there is no anger for Muslims. Suddenly, if you look at Gujarat, where there was a divide within intra-caste Hindu divide between Dalits, OBCs, that suddenly translated into an anti-Muslim. And Dalits also participated in the Gujarat. They have nothing to benefit from this right-wing ideology. But what explains Dalits participating in Gujarat? I think something that explains the idea of mobility. the idea of mobility, I think we have a very epic sort of Kurukshetra sort of image in our mind. Two camps struggle at, I think Anna Hazare movement perfected that. That is two camps exist, civil society versus state, and I think that right-wing ideology to my mind over the last 1 year has got reinforced because of Anna Hazare movement. My last question, my last question is that why did Congress itself take this movement seriously? I think which is also an equal puzzle. And a lot of people say because it was a mass movement, which I think is a humbug, because if mass movement is what Congress really responds, and I think there's no bigger mass movement than Telangana. Unprecedented mass movement in the post-independence period is what Telangana movement. And I think you'll have to see this parallel. The Telangana movement and Anna Hazare movement almost ran parallelly. And Congress has complete disregard and contempt for Telangana movement, was continuously responding to Anna Hazare movement. What explains this? I think there is something also new that is happening in Indian democracy here, that increasingly perhaps we are reconciling to the fact that state is a partisan institution, and state and governments have specialized social bases. That they respond to certain social base, in and around that they might respond to other social constituencies. I think instead of earlier we said that in democracy, state is something that represents everyone. But now I think over a period of time, post-neoliberalization, my own proposition is that I think we are increasingly reconciled in democracy today that each government, each political party in government and state itself as an institution would, I think, we are reconciled that they have certain preferential social base. And our notion of corruption, our notion of inefficiency comes in when these parties don't respond to their own social base, not to others. So the reason why Congress buckled under pressure is that this was a movement led by professionals, urban elites, NRIs, and this is the core constituency of what Congress is in Indian democracy, because it is the one which has introduced liberalization. And if they have a complaint from this group, that is when we'll start thinking that Congress is inefficient, Congress is corrupt, Congress is opportunistic. Similarly, you can see any number of these examples that have come over the last 10 years. That Advani, we know what is his ideology. But we are more aggrieved when Advani makes pro-Jinnah comments. Forget the historical veracity. They might be right. What is that in Jinnah's country? Historically, they were right comments. But all our sensibilities get violated. Because we said Advani is supposed to speak in a certain language. It's nothing to do with what Advani is saying. Once he crosses that social base, I think democracy starts feeling violated. Similarly, I think something has happened to CPM in Bengal. With your own core constituency of peasantry, if you start violating, I think you begin to look like a party which is opportunist. Not if you don't work for everyone. Similarly, Chandrababu Naidu suddenly has become pro-farmer. People have started, which is a good thing, but people have started abusing Chandrababu Naidu more after he has become pro-farmer. They said this was David Donga. This fellow is a thief because he is actually not a pro-farmer. So I think there is something in the democracy that's happening where I think there is a sudden shift where we are reconciled, which is healthy or not is something that I open for debate. Thank you.
See, it appears to me that the presentation of Ajay is good enough talking about the naive elements and then the simplistic aspects of the domain of culture, etc. But I think ultimately you are trying to draw a caricature of Anna Hazare. If that's the case, then I don't think he would have had the attention of either the mass media or the other agencies, including the masses themselves. I have a feeling that, when the nation actually is involved either consciously or unconsciously, what I would call the collective unconscious, it starts resounding, you see, through somebody, or it starts expressing through somebody. And there is a lot of talk before Anna Hazare did about corruption all through the country. It was there in newspapers, it was there on the TV, it was there on other aspects. But somebody who could come forward and say that I am prepared to die for it, that must have clicked the issue. And this collective unconscious, I think, must have got a kind of fillet. And it got, you see, the expressive manifestation of the problem. And through Anna Hazare, it became actually an issue acceptable probably temporarily to all the people. So to that extent, I think Anna Hazare has been a person not so naive, not so much of a caricature, but as an agency through whom you can raise some fundamental issues of democracy which you have actually not touched. And that is, when representative democracy fails, as it has done or as it has happened in India, then what is the alternative? The alternative has to come from the civil society organizations. And they have to provide, you see, political alternatives which may be either within the framework of Constitution or beyond the framework of the Constitution. Particularly, there are issues like corruption, there are issues like public welfare, there are issues like development which today are beyond the realm of the Parliament and Constitution, and I think that has to be addressed by us, taking the cue from, shall we say, from Anna Hazare and others who have tried to mobilize these issues. Thank you.